So going back to that first client, they paid you $400. How long did it take you to write the copy?
The reading the research material they sent me, I don't know how long that took. I looked at that for a few days off and on. But the actual writing only took a couple hours.
So it was a few days of digesting the information and letting it percolate, and then it was a few hours of actual work.
Right.
Did anyone react negatively to that cheekiness of yours when you would send them their free critique along with an offer and actually an invoice for rewriting it?
Oh, yes. Yes, I did. I had some very interesting responses. I did learn a really great technique, though, and it goes like this. I had a response that I would copy and paste into those emails that said, "Thank you for your feedback," and then I would send that, and then I would delete all the emails they had sent me up to that point and forget about them.
So you did get some negative response to your own marketing and promoting of yourself, but it sounds like it didn't really ruin your day.
No, I mean it didn't. If I dwell on that stuff, it can bother me. But it's interesting that we're having this conversation because when I was still in the early days of my career, I was working at a radio station in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I somehow saw an advertisement for a seminar that was being held in Atlanta, Georgia, for radio personalities, and it was your seminar. So I was broke, and I decided I had to go to that seminar, and I did, and I put it on a credit card, and I'll tell you how broke I was. I was so broke that I stayed one night at the hotel for the seminar, and I wasn't able to drive all the way back home because I was doing a morning show, and it was late at night when I was headed back home from Atlanta. So I slept at a rest area because I didn't have money for a hotel. But you had a session where you taught on self-promotion and how we shouldn't rely on the radio station to promote us, that the radio station was not responsible for my success. I was. That just lit me up, and I went back and, again, on a credit card, maybe not the greatest idea. Now in retrospect, I look back and think, maybe that wasn't the way to do it, but then again, maybe it was. I bought a bunch of alarm clocks, and I went to a printing shop and had a bunch of stickers made, and I think it was 144 alarm clocks with my name and the name of our radio show and the frequency and some goofy phrase that we thought was really clever. We stuck those labels to those alarm clocks and gave them out to people at remotes promoting our show. And I'd like to tell you that we became number one instantly in the next Arbitron, but that didn't happen. But that was the beginning of enjoying some success, and I got negative feedback about that. I got, it was early on in my career, and I got people saying, "You're such an egomaniac. How can you put yourself out there like that? And aren't you embarrassed to be so self-promotional?"
I'm guessing that negative feedback came from people inside the radio station?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course.
And how much promoting were they doing for their programs or their careers?
Zero.
Yeah. So there's something weird about your brain, because here's how most people, almost everyone in radio, deals with that. It's like this. Yeah, I'd love to promote the show, but the radio station has no budget. As though that means, okay, there's nothing we can do now. And you apparently decided if the radio station was not going to step up and provide a budget for promoting your show, that you would.
Exactly. And I wish I could say that I was born that way, but I think I can identify what caused me to start thinking that way. Do you remember a guy named Earl Nightingale?
Oh, of course.
I had a feeling you probably did. I listened to a recording of his. I think it was a program called Lead the Field, if I remember correctly. And he was talking about what it takes to become successful. And there's two things that he said in that program that I remember to this very day that really made an indelible impression on my brain. And one was that successful people regularly do the things that failures don't like to do. And the other thing that he said was he was telling the story of how people who want success before they put in the work and they make the investment and they take the risk to make it happen are like a man who's freezing to death, sitting in front of a fireplace, saying to the fireplace, "You give me some heat first, and then I'll go get some wood."
very
And
much
I don't-
a radio attitude, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. What I took it to mean was, if you're going to succeed, you, as much as possible, you just can't rely on other people to do it for you.
Okay, so for someone listening to this conversation right now, they have something in mind, a change they want to make. Let's say it's a professional change. What are the first 3 steps they should take?
I think the first step is to decide that the change is possible. And I know that probably sounds like self-help guru motivational tripe to a lot of people, but I really think it's important. And the second step, I believe, would be look for evidence of what's already working. It just made sense to me. I knew I needed to make a career change. I knew I had certain things I loved to do. I love to write. I love to think up ideas about how to market things, how to run your business better. That probably is another weird function of my brain, but I just enjoy that kind of stuff. And I started looking for people who were already doing it and looking to see, well, what are they doing that's working? And I have this, idea that if somebody bakes a cake that I like, if I get the recipe they used, I can probably come close to duplicating that cake. So to me, it's just a very mechanical process of look for what's working. And then the third step would be duplicate, and I don't mean copy or rip off, but just duplicate the steps that other people who are successfully following to do what you want to do. So I started reading books, and I bought, the part I didn't go into is after I read that book by Bob Bly, I went out and bought every resource I could find on how to have a freelance copywriting business. I bought a home study program that was like $400, and I bought dozens of books and audio programs, and I bought a training system from one guy, believe it or not, that cost $5,000. And it was worth it to me, and it's certainly paid me back many times. I'm not saying that anybody listening to this has to do that same kind of thing, but I do think that going and gathering all the information about what's working and pulling all those elements together and developing a checklist of, well, what are the essential things that all these people or companies seem to have in common, that's how you get the recipe. And then, so that's step 2. That's part of step 2. And then step 3 is just go do it. And for me, it was a process of, I tried things that I thought were part of the recipe and they didn't work. And so then I had to evaluate, well, why isn't that working? And go back and try it a different way or just eliminate it. You just, you sort of notice what's working and you do more of that, and you notice what's not working and you do less of that.
Ray, you said that at one point you paid $5,000 for a copywriting course. Can you name the person? Well, first of all, were you happy with it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I was delighted with it.
Whose course was that?
There's a gentleman named John Carlton.
No, okay. No, wait. No one who knows him ever uses the word gentleman in the same sentence as John Carlton.
I'm trying to curry some kind of favor in case he ever listens to this.
So it was John Carlton's course?
Yeah, absolutely. On my shelf, right, even as we speak, right here in my office.
And toward the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned that the first book you read on direct response copywriting was by Bob Bly. Why don't we give his web address? That's B as in Bob, ly.com, www.b as in boy, ly.com. He doesn't know we're giving this out. He'll be wondering where all this traffic comes from, but he's a good guy. And before we go, you know what, first let me thank you so that I don't forget. Thank you for being so generous of your time and your experience and your knowledge. And let me remind people your name and where to find you if they want. I've been talking to Ray Edwards, former radio guy who still has radio in his heart, and his website is not difficult to remember. It's rayedwards.com, R-A-Y-E, D as in David, W-A-R-D as in David, S.com, rayedwards.com. Ray, before we go, one last question. Those people who originally scoffed at your idea of leaving the comfort and safety of a paycheck or who were worried about you, what do they say now? Because, again, for people who don't know you, you are one of the most successful direct response copywriters on the planet. What do those people say now?
Well, the ones who I hear from, and I probably once every week or two, somebody will call me from my radio past, and pretty much the common thread is, can you tell me again what you're doing because I need to make a change, or I'm out of work. And in some cases, I will admit to a small amount of satisfaction that they're asking me that question. But overall, I'm honored that they would call to ask me, first of all, because I think that takes, if you've told somebody they're crazy, and then you are humbled enough to call them and say, oh, what are you doing? Because I need work, or things are not going so well, or I hate my job if they're still in radio. That's a common theme. And so what I say to them when they do call and say those things is, a lot of the things that I've said to you already on this call, Dan, I say, change is possible. You can make a decision to do something different. And the biggest lesson that I've learned along the way about the process that I went through probably is, at first I wanted to put my radio past behind me. I wanted to establish this new identity as a copywriter. And a good friend of mine pulled me aside one day and said, look, don't throw away your past. You've got a lot of valuable experience, and you need to continue to use that as an asset. So I would say that to anybody listening who's thinking about making a change, or maybe you're out of work and you've just got to do something different. Maybe you're working at some menial job that you don't really enjoy. I don't know what your situation might be, but change is definitely possible, and you can take all the good stuff that you got from being in the radio business, and you can use that in your new endeavor, whatever your new endeavor might be. I'm convinced that the skills that we learn in broadcasting have much wider application. So hopefully that would be an encouraging word for someone.
I would think so. And not only can people take the skills they learned in broadcasting, but it's easy for us in radio to forget that the outside world, I call them PWL, people with lives, non-radio people, they think of radio as being glamorous.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like when you were telling me how you first started and you built on your radio background, I thought, oh, that's so smart. Because people inside radio, we know about the 70-hour, 7-day work weeks and the low pay and the no overtime and all that stuff. But when you began your copywriting career, leveraging your radio background, I'm sure that impressed a lot of people. So I think that makes a lot of sense. But on the other hand, your story is a little discouraging, Ray, because if I understand it, you really haven't progressed that much. All those years in radio, you had a hard time explaining to people what you did for a living. And you're telling me that you still have a hard time explaining to people what you do for a living.
Some challenges, I guess, we're just destined to continue working through for all of our lives.
A cross we need to bear. Ray Edwards, rayedwards.com. I've known this guy for, like I say, 15, 20 years, something like that, and he's always been someone who struck me as someone who follows through. He says he's going to do something, and he does it, no matter how difficult it might sound to an outsider. Ray, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you, Dan. It's been my privilege.